Hello everyone. I am going to explain the poem Harlem by Langston Hughes. But before I start the poem, I would like to give you a brief note on the background of America in the 19th century. As we all know, slavery started in America in the 17th and 18th century. The Africans were brought to work in the cotton and tobacco plantations in America. They were severely oppressed and denied basic rights. Ultimately, slavery was abolished in 1865. But the conditions of the black did not improve. They were harassed and were denied a respected and dignified life in the American society. So this ultimately led to the civil rights movement in 1954 and continued till 1968. So this movement was basically against the legalized racial segregation, discrimination and disenfranchisement of the blacks in America. So throughout the 19th century, the blacks suffered a great deal. Langston Hughes, the poet of this particular poem, was an African American. His ancestors had been slaves. He was born in America. He completed his education and became a writer. And he was a leading phase of the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem is a neighborhood in New York where there was a flowering of black literature, intellectual and cultural life of the blacks. So Harlem, Langston Hughes was a leading figure of the movement. And he used to faithfully and honestly express the life of the blacks in America during the time, the frustrations they felt because they were denied an opportunity to be a part of the big American dream. So he intended his writings to be a voice for the blacks in America. So this particular poem, Harlem, it was published in the year 1951. And it was just before the civil rights movement where the discrimination was at its peak. The poem is also known as Dream Deferred. So if you look at the poem, it's a very short poem in fact, but it's a very, very powerful poem. The poet uses rhetorical languages and vivid imagery to express his thoughts. So the first line of the poem is a question. He begins the poem with a question. What happens to a dream deferred? This is how the poem begins. What happens to a dream deferred? Deferred means postponed. What can happen to a dream which is not fulfilled and which is postponed for a long period of time? So this is the question that the poet puts at the very beginning. And now, what is this dream? It can of course mean in the universal sense, it can mean any dream of any person. But here we cannot forget the background of this poem, because here Langston Hughes is specifically referring to the dream of the black Americans for an equal society, the dream for liberty, equality and prosperity in the land of opportunities, where they could become a part of an egalitarian society. And the rest of the poem is also in the form of questions which give possible answer to the main question. The main question is what happens to a dream deferred, and the rest of the poem are sub-questions which try to answer what can be the possibility, what can be the consequences if a dream is deferred. So the first question, or the first answer, or the first possibility that can happen to a dream that is deferred is, he says, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So here is the first simile. He gives a series of similes. Similes are comparisons. So here he compares a dream, the original dream, to a grape. A grape is green in color, it's round, it's juicy. But if you keep it in the sun for a long period of time, what will happen? It will turn into a raisin. It will shrunk up and it will become brown in color and it will become dry. So he says a dream can also become like a raisin, dried up. It can shrink if it is not fulfilled over a period of time. So this was his first possibility and alternative that can happen to a dream that is deferred. Then he gives the second simile, or the second answer. Or fester like a sore and then run. Sore, what is the meaning of a sore? A sore is a wound. And fester means infection. If an wound is not treated, and if it is left like that for a long period of time, it will be infected and it will be full of pus and it will run. The pus will come out and it will become all infection. It will be full of infections and it will be a painful injury. So he says, compares an unfulfilled dream to a painful injury which is infected and has become full of pus. And then the similes or the comparisons become more and more harsh as the poem proceeds. Then he says, does it stink like rotten meat? So this is a third possibility that can happen to a dream deferred. It can stink like rotten meat. What is the meaning of stink? Stink means foul smell. A meat which when it is rotten, it gives a very foul smell. So a dream can also turn into rotten meat and give a foul smell if it is not fulfilled and if it is deferred. And then the next possibility he gives is, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet. Now sugar syrup, when it is left for a long time, after some time it develops a crust with a hard covering. So he says deferred dreams can also become like a crust. It can become a covering. So this is the fourth comparison that he gives, the fourth simile of a dream turning into an hard cover. And then he gives another one after a little gap. He says, maybe it just sags like a heavy load. What is the meaning of sag? Sag means to bend with load. See, if we carry a heavy load on our back, we cannot stand straight. We have to bend. Similarly, if we carry our dreams in our heart for a long period of time, it will weigh us down emotionally and physically, and will not be able to stand upright. So we will bend under its burden. The dream will become a burden in our heart and it will weigh us down. And then the final simile, the final possibility jostles the reader with its suggestion of violence. And if you look at the text, you'll find the last line is in italics. To give, he writes it in italics because he wants to give special significance to the last line. The consequences that can happen. The last line is full of violence. He says an unfulfilled dream can burst like a bomb. It can explode like a bomb. If we carry it in our hearts for a long time, it will one day explode like a bomb. So here is a suggestion of violence in the last simile. Because here, the Black Americans had been waiting and waiting for opportunities which they had been denied. They did not have a dignified life. They were racially discriminated. They were segregated. So it was a simmering tension in the society, which ultimately led to the civil rights movement, where there was a lot of violence. So here, Langston Hughes' poem, this is a short poem, a very iconic poem, where the poet suggests the unforeseen consequences of deferred dreams. And the consequences might not only affect the dreamers, but it can also affect those who are denying the dream. So not only the African Americans will have to face the consequences, but the American society, the white society, will also have to face the consequences of this discrimination. So Langston Hughes concludes the poem with a strong suggestion of violence in the last simile. I hope you have understood the poem, and the poem is also supplemented by a PowerPoint presentation which you'll find in the website. You can go through it and you'll be able to understand it better. Thank you.